So let us take this moment to breathe into the holy and sacred, calling to mind not only those for whom we pray, but the world situation at large. For in faith and trust, we know that God understands each need. There is no request too large or too small to be heard. We slow our thoughts, listening for our hearts, becoming aligned with spirit as it pulses through our veins and our breath. The news today brings our hearts sorrow, worry, and a great deal of fear. And in times like these, we struggle to see the good, to hold the high watch for both sides, rather than to choose who is right and who is wrong. Global conflict, though today far away from our shores, touches us nonetheless, for life is interconnected. We may be apart from it, but we are a part of it. We are called to a deeper awareness of what we know is true. Mm-hmm. Our prayer does have power. It is not a plea for fixing or changing the situation. Rather, it is an alignment with the great presence and power we call God. Here in this moment, we have the opportunity to rise above the discord and see with the eyes of the heart. In this silent moment, let us align ourselves with compassion and peace for our struggling world. Let us not falter in holding and affirming the truth that we know. God is present right here, right now, as peace for them, for us, for all. Thank you, God. Amen. Well, we begin a new month. I actually have long sleeves on. It's cool here in Oklahoma this morning. It's those kind of days that we've waited for over the course of the summertime. And we also shift into the month, the theme of the month, if you will. One of our 12 powers is that of zeal. And zeal is our ability to take action, to change our course, to rise above it, if you will. You see, these 12 powers that we talk about in unity have a certain connection to the Eastern traditions of the chakras, which many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with. And Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, through a process of prayer and meditation, began to sort of expand that and saw that each month had an energetic theme. I want to use that word energetic because last month we talked about September being the month of order, that divine order. The order is our ability to harmonize and balance. And have you ever noticed that when things are in order, how much more energy you have? You know, today is Sunday. For some of you, it may be the first day of the week. For me, it is. And I already have chili made for dinner, and I've already got the kitchen cleaned up, and I already have my list of things that I need to do for this week. So my life is in order all my bases are covered. So now I'm free to expand my energy to do more creative things and to be out and about in the world. And it's just interesting how, as the season changes and we get cooler weather, how we feel freer, don't we? I mean, for me, the heat is extremely oppressive. And so all of a sudden, it's just like I've been freed. I can go outside and I can breathe again. So it's not an accident that we talk about these 12 powers and their energetic pull that they have in our lives. Last month order, getting things together. And this month, we have been freed to go about the process of living our life in a new and exciting way. And I've been playing with, it's one of those things that you sort of do, you play with words and ideas. And there was a song I heard many years ago. It was in a movie and it was called Rise Above It. And I always loved the song. It was real catchy. And if you ever saw the movie Cool Runnings with John Candy, it's the theme song of the movie. You've got to rise above it. And it got me to thinking about the verbiage of overcoming and defeat. They're very different, aren't they? We often talk in Unity about overcoming something, of defeating something, like we're defeating a habit or whatever it might be. But I thought to myself, there's things in life that we cannot overcome and that we cannot defeat. And I'm going to call them things we rise above. Looking in the Buddhist tradition calls it suffering. So I don't know if suffering speaks to me per se, but the traditions, either 4 or 5 sufferings, depending. The first suffering is birth. The second is aging. The third is illness, accident. The fourth is death, as in our own death. But the fifth is death of a loved one, plant, person, or thing. And I think that those sufferings from the Buddhist tradition are the things that are the themes and threads that wind through our whole life. We never defeat or overcome them. We have to rise above them. During our trip to Maine 2 weeks, it seems like a long time ago, but it was just 2 weeks ago. My girlfriend, Diane, and I, my photography buddy, and I went to Campobello, which is in New Brunswick, Canada. Now, Campobello was the summer retreat home of the Roosevelts. It was purchased by the parents of Franklin Roosevelt, and it was given to Franklin and Eleanor as a wedding gift, little 34-room cottage that was there on a beautiful expanse. It's actually an island in Canada, which I didn't know. Well, for many years, the Roosevelt family spent their summers in Campobello. And in 1921, Franklin was on his way there, because it's quite a journey from Hyde Park, New York. It took about 2.5 days to get there. He stopped or was invited to speak at a Boy Scout convention. And he had always been a Boy Scout. He loved the Boy Scouts. And so he's like, sure, I'd love to do that. Well, while he was there, he drank some tainted water, which we now know is one of the main causes in the past of polio. He contracted polio, and so did 3 other young men at the time. But of course, he didn't know what the problem was. He went on to Campobello, got there, and he said to Eleanor, I just don't feel very good, kind of got a fever, thought he was coming down with maybe the flu or a cold, and he goes off to bed. The next morning, he woke up finding one leg was paralyzed. He couldn't get out of bed. The next morning, he woke up and found that both legs were paralyzed and had to have help, just literally sitting up in the bed. He stayed at Campobello for about 6 weeks, because he really didn't know at that time what was wrong or what was wrong with him, still coming from the assumption that it was maybe a pneumonia or flu or any of that kind of thing. Finally, he was well enough to go back to Hyde Park, New York, where he was diagnosed with polio. Now, here's an interesting part of the story. Franklin was so committed to overcoming and defeating this disease that he asked to have made 2 iron leg braces. And every day for several years, Eleanor on one hand and his secretary on the other hand, they would help him walk from the house down the hill to the mailbox and back, because he was determined to overcome this illness. Finally, after a couple of years and more understanding of what polio was all about, the doctor came to him and said, Franklin, I'm going to tell you something. Polio is a virus that attacks the nerves in the spinal cord. And when it does that, you are paralyzed, and you are paralyzed for life. And at that point, Roosevelt had to really ask himself some down dirty digging, if you will, in the soul. What am I going to do to rise above it? I am not going to get out of it. I'm not going to overcome it. I'm not going to defeat it. I'm going to have to rise above it. And of course, the subsequent story we all know is that he became president of the United States. He rose above it. It was interesting to me as I, sort of was playing with this story and the ideas that I started to Google how many celebrities have major life-threatening illnesses. And I was really shocked the number of people who have cancer, people that are on stage, people that you've seen in movies, people that you know. There's, of course, the very prominent, like Michael J. Fox with Parkinson's. And I heard that Neil Diamond has Parkinson's disease. Broke my heart. I love Neil Diamond. And of course, Christopher Reeves, when he fell off the horse and broke his neck, he was a quadriplegic. And how many of them have risen above it? They could not conquer it. They could not overcome it. They rose above it to not only improve their own life, but to bring focus, attention, money, and research to these issues, to our world at large. So it seems to me that if we're going to rise above these things that we cannot change, then the first question we have to ask ourselves is, what is our mindset about this? All too often I hear people say, well, God did it to me, or God's punishing me, or this shouldn't have happened to me or to my loved ones, whatever it might be. You're right. It shouldn't have happened, but it did. So where do we go from here? Obviously, the first thing I think in all of our spiritual journey is acceptance. And by acceptance, I mean, I'm going to call it reality check. We have to come to grips with the fact that this is where we are. And every support group in the world does primarily that. They invite you to the opportunity to accept where you are in your journey. How many of you have been on a weight loss program? What is the very first thing they do? Please step on the scale and you say to yourself, it was more than a cookie that I ate? Well, yes, I went to a quit smoking clinic many years ago because I was a smoker. And they handed us a little pack, a little form, and said, we just want you to log every time you smoke. And I thought, that's easy. I don't smoke that much. What a shock. I was a heavy smoker, fortunately for not too many years, because it was eye-opening when I had to come to that place of saying, oh, this is what it really is. That moment of what I call the reality check. Just like Franklin, he tried so hard to overcome and defeat it. And finally, there was the moment of saying, this is the reality check. You are not going to overcome it. You need to rise above it. So this idea of overcoming and acceptance, learning to appreciate the value of adversity in our lives. Now, I don't know about you, but that's not my favorite thing to have happen. I would prefer life to just be calm, serene, and floating down the river of life in all good times. But it isn't what makes us strong. You know, there's an old quote that says, ships are safe within the harbor, but that's not what ships were made for. The ship wasn't made to sit in the harbor, and we are not made to sit in the harbor. And so it's that adversity, if our mindset is such that we understand the challenging times, challenging people, challenging situations invite us to grow. All too often, what can happen is that when we go through difficult times, we become more compassionate people. Isn't that what like cancer support groups are all about? Because you see, if you don't have cancer, you don't get what people are going through. You can't just walk in and say, oh, wow, I get you. No, you don't. You don't get them unless you've walked a mile in their shoes. And that is the power, because they don't have to say a lot. Other people understand completely what they're going through as the process of their healing and their recovery. Excuse me. But it can also make people angry and bitter. Why is this happening to me? Rather than an understanding of how adversity can really stretch us, grow us, and mold us into truly greater people. Can we look at Michael J. Fox? Is his life perfect? No. Was Roosevelt's life perfect? No. Christopher Reeve? No. But what they became as a result of what had happened to them was that rising above it and saying, okay, here's the baseline. Now, how do I go forward with my life from here? I think that when we talk about acceptance and adversity, we also end up talking about surrender. But unfortunately, that word kind of carries some baggage that we don't like. The enemy surrendered. In defeat, they surrendered. This is not the surrender we're talking about. Maybe it would be better to say it's the point where I find inner peace. When I come to acceptance, I'm willing to look at this is where I really am. This is what I can or cannot do. Then I can start to say, okay, how do I live my life now? And let us be very, very careful, friends. The universe is not teaching you a lesson. God is not teaching you a lesson. You and I are enrolled in the University of Life, and we are choosing to learn. No one is forcing you to learn. The choices are yours and yours alone. You can't do over the situation of your birth. Your mother, your father, the place, the time, the date, can't do it over again. And if you keep living year in and year out, here's the ultimate reality. You're getting older, so you are aging, as we all are experiencing. With aging comes all that comes with aging. In illness or an accident, we can't change it. We can't fix it. We can't go back and do it over. But we can rise above it. Even thinking about our own death. What do we want to leave as a legacy? We don't get a do-over. We want to go into our final moment and final breath saying, I tried. I gave it my all. Here's something somebody told me that just pained me. They told me that I will never get my checklist all done. I was shocked. I was sure that the very last moment of my life, I would say, check, I finished it all. But they told me I'm not going to make it that way. It's interesting how we then can move to inner peace when we come to that acceptance that this is where we are, and this is how life is unfolding, and how we engage that. But here's something interesting. We were taught a skill set that is not rising above it. We were taught a skill set of overcoming and defeating. We were taught to set goals. We were taught to achieve our dreams. We were taught to be focused and self-absorbed and goal-oriented. That is not how we rise above things. We need a different set of tools. The other day I was reading in one of my daily messages from a man by the name of Pico Iyer. Now, he is a British essayist, and he wrote this passage. I love this. I'm going to read this to you. What we need to do to respond differently is we need to learn different tools. And here's what he says. In an age of speed, I began to think nothing could be more invigorating than slowing down. In an age of distraction, nothing could be more luxurious than paying attention. In an age of constant movement, nothing is more urgent than sitting still. Slowing down, paying attention, sitting still. Father Richard Rohr, in his book, The Second Half of Life, writes that in the first half of life, it's all about accumulating. It's about accumulating a self persona. It's about career. It's about marriage. It's about getting a house and a car and a dog and all of that. It is about the accumulation process. And it's right and perfect that we should do that. But as we come into the second half in our life, we have the wisdom of knowing things don't make love. It's people that we love and community. It's not about being self-absorbed. It's about giving out and giving over, paying attention, slowing down, and listening deeply. You know, the month of October really invites us, kind of invigorates us as it gets a little cooler and it starts, the leaves start to change color. And all along, it's building within us. I'm going to call it the season of reflection. October, November, December, when there's less light, it gets dark early. These are times of great introspection. And isn't it surprising how we fear that darkness? How we fear it so much that Christmas decorations are already out in all of the stores, that we put up more and more lights during this time, rather than understanding that the season of fallow and darkness is where we settle down, settle in, where we mature. Because you see, as we have cleared out the closet in balance and harmony in September, we've now had an opening and a new awareness of who and what we are. We're coming to that place of saying, you know what? I can rise above this. I don't have to overcome it. I don't have to defeat it. I can find ways to incorporate it in my life and in my life journey. And what happens then in December? You see, it's a spiritual process, my friends. We have to organize. We have to let go. We have to release. And then comes an event that we call Christmas. And what really is Christmas? It's a new birth. It's a new understanding of that divine life within us that has risen above all that is part of our life, who and what we are. and given us the opportunity to grow into new and exciting adventures of the world and our life as it waits for us in the future. Thank you for joining me today. God bless.